Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're tackling paragraph writing head on. You've given us quite a challenge with this source material.
Oh, is it a tough one?
Well, it's packed with info. It's practically a masterclass in academic paragraphs, structure, argumentation, you name it, even editing techniques.
Wow. It's amazing how much goes into crafting a single paragraph. I'm really excited to unpack this one.
Me too, especially because this source emphasizes how even a simple paragraph has an anatomy, a structure we can follow.
It does. Kind of like a mini essay, right?
Absolutely. And our source breaks it down into three parts: the top sentence, the supporting sentences, and the concluding sentence.
Classic structure. Though it's easy to forget how important each part is, especially that topic sentence. It's like,
A roadmap for the reader.
yes, more like a lighthouse beam. It guides the reader through the fog. Without it, the paragraph loses focus and the reader can get lost.
I love that analogy. So we have our lighthouse beam guiding the way, but what about building that solid foundation for the argument? The source mentions so many ways to develop those supporting sentences.
It does. There's definition, narration, description. The list goes on.
Right. Examples, process analysis, cause and effect. With so many options, how do we pick the right one?
Well, that's where thinking about your purpose comes in. Why are you writing this paragraph? And who you're writing it for? If, say, you're describing a historical event, maybe narration would work best, creating that chronological flow.
Makes sense. But if you're explaining a complex concept,
Definition might be the way to go. It all depends on what you're trying to achieve with that paragraph.
it's like having a toolbox full of tools. You wouldn't use a hammer to tighten a screw.
Exactly. Choose the right tool for the job.
The source gives this great example, actually, of using description to really bring a setting to life. It talks about describing an old Medina, using all those sensory details.
Oh, I remember that part, like the sights, sounds, and even smells, right?
Yes, it transports the reader right to that place.
Such a powerful technique. It shows that even in academic writing, we don't have to be dry and boring. We can use those vivid details to really make an impact.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've built a solid foundation with our supporting sentences. But how do we craft a concluding sentence that doesn't just leave the reader hanging?
Oh, I hate that. It's like watching a movie that cuts off before the ending. So unsatisfying.
The worst.
Your source really hits on how important it is to give that sense of closure, like a resolution in a good movie.
Makes sense. So how do we do that?
There are a few ways. We can reiterate the game idea, summarize the key points, or even leave the reader with a thought-provoking question. The key is to make sure they walk away feeling satisfied, like they've reached the end of the journey.
Okay, so we've covered the basic anatomy of a paragraph, but how do we make sure all those sentences flow together smoothly? Make it really enjoyable to read. That's where those editing techniques come in, right?
Absolutely. And our source is packed with them. It talks about using techniques like repetition to emphasize a point, parallel structures to create that nice balance and rhythm.
And things like synonyms and pronouns to avoid sounding repetitive.
Yes, it's all about creating that seamless flow, like a river meandering through a landscape.
I love that image. It's like you're guiding the reader effortlessly through the paragraph, making sure they don't stumble over any rough patches.
Exactly. You want them to enjoy the journey as much as the destination.
Speaking of smooth journeys, we can't forget about the mechanics, the grammar, and punctuation. Our source points out that even though it might seem basic, accuracy here is key for clarity.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, imagine showing up to a job interview in pajamas.
I would never.
Exactly. You want to present your best self. And the same goes for your writing. Making sure those commas are in the right places, that you're using the right tenses. It all adds up to a polished, professional piece.
Polished, professional, and easy to understand. And those little things, they can really trip you up. I remember learning about coordinating conjunctions in school, trying to memorize all of them. Our teacher taught us the acronym FANBOYS.
Oh, yeah. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so.
Exactly. I wonder if mnemonics like that really help people remember those grammar rules.
I think so. Anything that makes it easier to digest those complex concepts. It's like having a secret code to unlock the rules of language.
I like that. Okay, so we've covered the structure, editing, and those essential mechanics. Now let's dive into some specific types of paragraphs you might encounter in your writing. The source highlights process paragraphs and opinion paragraphs. Which one should we tackle first?
Let's start with process paragraphs. Those are all about guiding the reader through a series of steps or explaining how something works.
Like a recipe, or instructions for assembling furniture.
Exactly. The source breaks them down into two types: instructional, which are those direct step-by-step instructions, and advisory, which offer more general guidance and suggestions.
So instructional is like, do this, then do that, while advisory is more like, here are some things to keep in mind.
You got it. And the source emphasizes that the language you use to convey those instructions really matters. Imperative sentences, for example, are super effective for guiding the reader through a process. Those direct commands like add the sugar or preheat the oven.
Oh, right. So it's less like you might want to add the sugar and more like add the sugar.
Exactly. You want to be clear and direct. And then there are those modal verbs like should, can, or must. They add another layer to those instructions, like indicating obligation or possibility.
So the difference between saying you must wear a helmet and you should wear a helmet, right?
Exactly. One's a rule, the other's a suggestion. The source actually gives this cool example of a process paragraph on how to make traditional Moroccan tea. It breaks down the process step by step, but it also uses these vivid descriptions of the smells and flavors, makes it both informative and engaging.
I love that. I can practically smell the mint and taste the sweetness just thinking about it.
It really shows how even a process paragraph can be enjoyable to read. Okay, ready to move on to opinion paragraphs. Those are the ones where we get to persuade the reader.
Ooh, I like a good debate. Let's do it.
It's amazing to me how these techniques can work beyond academic writing, too.
That's what I was thinking. The source kind of touches on this, how we can take these paragraph building skills and apply them to other types of writing.
It definitely does. It challenges us to think bigger. Like, how could we use these principles to write, let's say, a really captivating short story or even a persuasive marketing campaign?
Ooh, good examples. It makes you think about how the purpose of the writing changes the game.
It totally does. Like with that short story, you're not just trying to convey information objectively. You want to evoke emotions, create suspense.
Right, you're painting a picture with words, drawing the reader into the story's world.
Exactly. And those transition signals we talked about, they could become tools for creating drama or foreshadowing. Like imagine a simple phrase like, but little did she know, suddenly changing the whole direction of the story.
Oh, wow, yeah, like a plot twist in a movie.
Exactly. And think about a marketing campaign. You could use those persuasive techniques we discussed to highlight the benefits of a product. Maybe a strong call to action at the end of a paragraph to encourage the reader to buy it.
It's all about that strategy, like in those infomercials when they say, but wait, there's more.
Yeah, they want to make you feel like you have to act now. It's all about psychology. But no matter what you're writing, whether it's a research paper or a novel, clarity is key, right? That's where those seemingly boring things like capitalization and punctuation come in.
Oh, for sure. I used to struggle with capitalization rules back in school. So many little details to remember.
There are. But our source does a good job of breaking it all down, making it easy to understand.
Like having a cheat sheet for all those capitalization questions.
Right. And then there's punctuation. So important for guiding the reader and making sure your message is clear.
The source compares punctuation marks to traffic signals, which I love. A misplaced comma can be like a sudden stop sign, disrupting the flow of the sentence.
It totally is. Or think about the semicolon, like a roundabout, connecting two related ideas without bringing everything to a halt.
It's like that pause in a song right before it transitions into a new verse. It creates a sense of anticipation, connection.
Yes, exactly. And don't even get me started on quotation marks.
Oh, those can be tricky, especially when it comes to where to put those commas and periods, inside or outside the quotes.
It tricks a lot of people up. But this source explains those rules clearly. Okay, you ready to circle back to those process paragraphs for a minute?
Sure, what about them?
Well, remember how the source highlighted those specific techniques for conveying instructions effectively?
You mean like those imperative sentences and modal verbs?
Those are the ones. It's amazing how the right words can make such a difference. Imperative sentences are those direct commands, like add the sugar or preheat the oven.
Right, they tell the reader exactly what to do.
Exactly. No room for interpretation. And then we have the modal verbs like should, can, or must. They add that nuance to your instructions.
Like obligation or possibility, you must wear a helmet versus you should wear a helmet.
Exactly. The source actually gave some really good examples of how these techniques can be used for any type of process.
It's making me think of those online tutorials like how to fix something or bake something. They're all about breaking it down step by step.
Exactly. Clear and easy to follow. Before we jump over to opinion paragraphs, I want to touch on one more thing. Logical order.
Oh, right. Arranging those ideas in a way that makes sense.
That's it. Our source talks about three methods. Chronological order, order of importance, and spatial order.
Okay, remind me, how do those work again?
Well, with chronological order, you're presenting things in the order they happened. Like if you were writing about a historical event.
Like a timeline, you start at the beginning and move forward.
Then there's order of important, where you arrange your ideas from, say, most important to least important. Really powerful for building an argument.
Like presenting evidence in a court case. You start with your strongest point.
Exactly. And then there's spatial order. That's about describing something based on its physical location. So if you're describing a painting, you might start with the foreground and move to the background.
Like you're giving the reader a tour of the image?
You got it. So yeah, choosing the right logical order depends on what you're writing about. But no matter which method you choose, consistency is super important.
Consistency. In what way?
Mostly in terms of tense. If you're writing about something that happened in the past, stick with the past tense. Don't suddenly switch to the present or future. It can be jarring for the reader.
Like keeping a steady beat in a song, you don't want those sudden tempo changes that throw you off.
Exactly. It should flow smoothly. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have, from the basic anatomy of a paragraph to all these little details. But, it makes me wonder, what are some of the most common mistakes people make when writing paragraphs? What are those pitfalls we should avoid?
Ooh, good question. I'd say one of the biggest mistakes is forgetting to include those counter arguments, especially when you're writing an opinion paragraph.
Right, you have to acknowledge the other side.
Exactly. Otherwise, it just sounds one-sided. And another common mistake is using weak or irrelevant supporting sentences.
Because those are supposed to be the backbone of the paragraph.
They are. And one more thing I see all the time. The overuse of clichés or jargon, it makes the writing sound so stale and unoriginal.
Like using the same ingredients in every dish you cook, eventually it gets boring.
Totally. The key is to use fresh language, keep it engaging.
Wow, this deep dive has been incredible. We've really unpacked the art of paragraph writing. It's not just about knowing the rules, it's about understanding how to use them effectively.
It is, and how to make your writing shine. But before we wrap things up completely, I want to touch on one final aspect of paragraph writing: voice and style. That unique element that makes your writing stand out.
Yes, that's what makes it memorable. Let's talk about that. So we've covered all the technical stuff, right? Like how to structure a paragraph, use the right punctuation, all that. But what about that extra something, that personal touch that makes a piece of writing really stand out?
You mean like voice and style, that's what gives writing personality.
Exactly. Our source didn't go too deep into this, but it did mention that even in academic writing, you can still let your personality shine through.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine reading a textbook where every paragraph sounds exactly the same. So dry and impersonal.
It would be torture. So how do we bring that voice and style into our writing, without sacrificing clarity or professionalism?
Well, I think it starts with self-awareness. How do you talk in real life? What kind of language do you use naturally? What are you passionate about? Let those things come through in your writing.
So it's not about trying to sound like someone else.
No, not at all. It's about embracing your own unique way of expressing yourself. Think about your favorite authors. Their writing has a certain flavor, a rhythm that you recognize instantly. That's their voice, their style.
It's like when you hear your favorite song on the radio, you know who it is right away.
Exactly. And just like a musician develops their style over time, so does a writer. It takes practice, experimentation. You have to play with language and see what feels authentic to you.
Our source also talks about considering the audience, right? How do we adapt our voice and style to connect with them?
That's so important. It's about putting yourself in their shoes. Who are they? What are their interests? What kind of language will resonate with them? Once you understand your audience, you can adjust your tone accordingly.
So, like, if I were writing for a group of scientists, I'd probably use more technical language, right? But if I'm writing for a general audience,
You'd want to keep it simple, more conversational.
right, it's like choosing what to wear. You wouldn't wear a ball gown to a backyard barbecue.
Exactly. Dress for the occasion. But it's not just about the words themselves. Sentence structure and rhythm play a big part in creating style, too.
Oh, right. Some writers like those short, punchy sentences, while others prefer long, flowing ones.
Exactly. It's like choosing between a fast, upbeat tempo or a slower, more mellow one in a piece of music. And don't be afraid to break the rules sometimes. A well-placed sentence fragment or some repetition, those can add emphasis and make your writing more impactful.
I love that. So it's not just about following the rules, it's about knowing when to bend them.
Exactly. That's how you create something truly unique and engaging.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. We've really explored everything about paragraph writing, from the basics to those subtle stylistic choices that make all the difference. It feels like we've graduated from paragraph boot camp or something.
I'd say so. And I hope our listeners feel empowered to go out there and write amazing paragraphs.
Me too. But before we go, I want to leave everyone with one final thought. Those paragraphs, those building blocks of writing, they have so much power. They can inform, persuade, inspire. They can even make us laugh or cry.
Absolutely. They're more than just sentences strung together.
Exactly. So to all our listeners out there, use them wisely, use them thoughtfully, and most importantly, use them to share your unique voice with the world.
That's what it's all about.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the world of paragraph writing. Until next time, happy writing.